The BBC. Is it the BBC which has got Richard Madeley on it? No, it's ITV. ITV has said absolutely that there is no comeback for Boris Johnson in the short to mid-term. And it interviewed Andrew Neil. Now, Andrew Neil is very interesting because Andrew Neil dismissed Boris from the Spectator. So he knows something about Boris's shortcomings. And he says that Boris's options are now seriously limited. And he thinks that Boris coming back after a Sunak defeat in a general election, Boris coming back to lead the opposition, he says that's not going to happen. Boris as the leader of the opposition is not a job for Boris. He wouldn't be interested in it, and he wouldn't have time to make any money. He thinks that Boris belongs to Boris's own party, which is a party of one member, and he will only act in the interests of his member. So whether Boris retains popularity, that was an interesting question. And he suggests that he's never really had popularity. What he's had is an ability to command headlines. He's credited with getting Brexit done, and he has a knack of appealing to the masses, to the broad church of Conservative members and beyond. But of course, in the last election, he was up against Jeremy Corbyn, who did not appeal to the broad church, and he was energizing the group of people who felt that Brexit was a tired issue and we just wanted to get it out of the way. Could he set up a new party, asks Susanna, and Richard Madeley can be heard saying, good question. But Andrew Neil strides over that confidently and says, no, it's too much work. Boris isn't capable of doing that amount of work. And they go on and say, well, what about Farage's plan for a new alliance with Johnson? A centre-right proposal that has been discussed with people very closely aligned to Boris Johnson, apparently. And Andrew Neil again is dismissive. He says Farage is desperate to get back into politics, and he sees Boris now as a soulmate. They've both got huge name recognition, but it won't happen. It will fail, he says. Absolutely, it will fail. And as a demonstration of that, he says that Boris's letter of resignation was a call for revolution, and no one turned up. Nadine Dorries and a non-entity no one's ever heard of, Nigel Adams. No one has seized on that revolution. And the report, he says, from what he's heard, is devastating. But at the same time, Boris is irrepressible and things can change. So what has Boris done now? He's thrown shrapnel and distractions to avoid taking real responsibility. And Andrew Neil says that despite all his efforts not to cast him as a proto-Trump, a quasi-Trump, a trumpet, it's wrong. Boris Johnson is genuinely throwing a Trump tantrum and throwing a dead cat on the table. But as for the future, he says, the confluence of circumstances, what a lovely expression, the confluence of circumstances in the years to come could well allow for a comeback, because Boris is young. Boris is young in political terms. Boris is young. I know we've seen so many young people seizing control of the political, the senior offices in politics, but that's not going to last forever. And in the States, of course, we've got extremely old people seizing control of the great political offices. That could happen here too. Age is no barrier to political high command, and Boris may well have a a comeback late in his life, but it won't be in the next year. It may not be in the next 5 years. It may not even be in the next 10 years. But one should never write Boris off. That's the opinion of Andrew Neil, who is somebody who wrote Boris off, who sacked Boris from The Spectator. Boris has been sacked and dismissed more times than it can be written about, and always for the same issue. Boris never learns.